Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. You know how we do on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. We blow hot and cold. When we're hot, we're really hot, and the content keeps flying straight out of the door. And I'm super excited about this because sometimes in West Indies cricket, we can get trapped into this idea of thinking that West Indies cricket only means the men's team or the under-19s and so on and so forth. And it's important that we always remember that it's not just West Indies men, it's West Indies women's team as well. And as we record this episode, we are about 2 weeks out from the 2022 World Cup and the opening game of the 2022 World Cup, West Indies versus the host New Zealand. And with that in mind, there was only one person I could get on that I trusted to give a comprehensive overview of where our team is at, what we should expect, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and so on and so forth. And I'm super happy to see that Ayana Holder is back with us on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast to discuss all things West Indies women. How are you doing, Ayana?
Hey, Marsh. Thanks for having me again. I'm good. I had to come repping with my 2018 World Cup shirt. I got this from one of the management at Cricket West Indies. And I'm looking forward to the discussion. I think that, this World Cup was delayed a bit and it's finally happening. So I think that there's a lot on the horizon for the women.
Most definitely. And I don't know, I kind of feel like when we talk about West Indies women, it almost feels like the talking points for the team are set. Everyone goes back to 2016 and everyone says that what's happened with the women's team, there's been a huge decline and where are we going next? And obviously Courtney's now in the hot seat. There was limited cricket played once the pandemic set in. You could even argue before the pandemic set in.
Exactly.
And as we approach a World Cup, my gut feeling, but we'll unpick this, my gut feeling is that this World Cup has come a bit too soon for where Courtney is trying to take this side. But we rally all the same and we look at who's been picked and we assess the chances. And I hope that for everyone who's listening to this, we put, however the women go on to perform, we put it in the right context and not just see it as black and white. Well, they didn't win, so therefore they're no good. Kind of like what we do with the men's team. They lost the match, so they're no good. There's nothing to be learned from this, and so on and so forth. But before I come to you straight away, Ayana, let's put the team up on the screen just for the benefit of those who don't know who's being named. And obviously, if you're listening to this on the audios, you might not see the visuals. Obviously, I'm recording this as well for people who like to listen to the podcast on the visuals. So the team: Stefani Taylor, captain; Anisa Mohammed, vice captain; Aliyah Elaine, Shermaine Campbell, Shamila Connell, Deandra Dottin, Afi Fletcher, Cherry-Ann Fraser, Chanel Henry, Casey Knight, Hayley Matthews, Chadine Nation, Karishma Ramarak, Shakira Selman, Rashada Williams, and then the travelling reserves, Kaisa Schultz, Mandy Mangru, and Janilla Glasgow. For those who aren't familiar with the West Indies women team, particularly the reserves, there'll be some new names there that you possibly wouldn't know about unless you've been properly following what they're doing. But there's also within the crux of the main team, the big names are there. I think the names that I would expect someone to throw out there, they're all there. They're all back for this particular World Cup. But Ayana, coming straight to you, when you heard the team, when you saw the announcement, what was your gut feeling? What was your immediate kind of take when you saw that squad?
Honestly, my immediate take was that there's a keen I guess mission to ensure that we have more players coming through, because the regular names are there, yes, but you see the young lady Rashada Williams included, Sharianne Fraser as well. Sharianne would have been around the side for quite a while. Rashada played in the 18 tour that they had against Pakistan in the summer last year, and she made a decent impression. I think in one of the games she got a top score, 78. Since then, she hasn't really gone on to play any major big innings. But I think that this team, and my gut feeling tells me that we can't judge this team by wins and losses,
Mm.
but more so by development, to see if they're ticking the boxes, if they're doing the right things, if batters are getting the scores, just setting themselves certain targets and reaching those targets. So it's a good mixture of youth and experience. And I think that it's laying a foundation for some more things to come in the future.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think I was able to join lead selector Anne Brown John's press conference a couple of days ago from when we're recording this, and she pretty much echoed what you have said, Ayana, that this squad selection is about as much as, yes, trying to give a good account of ourselves, but with one eye to the future. And and if there's been one criticism of the West Indies women's team over the last 6 years, it's that who are the new players coming through, and you can't have new players coming through if you don't expose them at the highest level. So if that means in the short term we have to suffer a bit, I'm prepared for that to happen if the result in the long term is that we can bring through a new cadre of players that can be spoken of in the same way we speak about a Dottin or a Taylor or a Matthews, etc. It's not gonna just happen overnight. No matter how West Indian we want to be about it, it's not going to happen overnight, and we've got to find ways to blood this next generation in, so to speak. At the top of the show, I kind of hinted at it, and I'm again eager to get your views on it. If there's one thing which has held this team back, it's the lack of cricket. Courtney's spoken about it. Anybody who follows the women's team closely has spoken about it since 2019, end of 2019 to now. So we're talking 2.5 years. We have played 4 series of cricket.
Yeah.
Pakistan at home, South Africa at home, South Africa away,
And England.
Pakistan away. And yes, the 18 games as well. And then the World Cup qualifiers obviously got cut short after one game.
I think we went to England
Oh, there was
in
England. Yeah, sorry,
20
yeah, good point. Sorry, I always forget that.
2021.
Yeah, so there was a
Yeah.
bit of an England tour thrown in during the pandemic as well.
But
How? Go on, sorry, go on.
you know, we won the T20 World Cup in 2016,
Mm.
and then in 2017 in the World Cup we came sixth, and didn't really make a good account for ourselves. But they didn't even play a lot of cricket since that 2016 World Cup for the team to really have that continuous progression. So
Mm.
when you see the results and you see that the results are not really that good, is also because there's been a lack of cricket. They're just training or at home for quite some time and then only have like one series a year. That is a bit of a hurdle for them to really get over and develop themselves as individual players.
Yeah, and I think it's important that, again, we've already mentioned this word context, but it's important heading into this World Cup that people see that wider context. It's too easy for me anyway. It's too easy to say, where's why have we not got this or why have we not got that? You can't expect overnight success with lack of cricket, and we were due to have Stefani Taylor on an episode, and it got cut short due to technical difficulties. And we're trying to make that happen again sometime soon. But I'll always remember that there was an article that ran maybe about a couple of years ago where I think it was FICA, which is like the organization that speaks to players around the world.
Yeah.
And they were looking at women's cricket, and Stefani Taylor was featured in it. I'll never forget this. And they were kind of speaking to the different captains across the different international sides. And Stefani made this very pertinent point that there's just not enough cricket played in general in the Caribbean. Now, this article was 2 years ago. This was pre-pandemic, and she was making the point that we don't. How can we see the next generation come through when there's not even enough cricket for her? And she's one of the best players in the world, and
Yeah.
she say there's not enough cricket for her. Never
Yeah.
mind the next generation. So there's a lot of again, I'm not saying it's an excuse, but it's a valid context
Yep.
to place on the development of this side, both in the here and now,
I
and
know.
also going forward. But in light of that, Ayana, what then would you say, given with that limited cricket, is realistic for this team to achieve in this World Cup?
Well, I did some research looking at the batting and bowling performances over the from 2020 until now. And obviously the three stars are Deandra Dotting, Stefani, and Haley. Deandra getting 2 centuries and 250s, Haley getting 1 century and 250s, and Stefani two.
Mm,
And the others in the middle order, Casey Knight, she got 1/2 century. Well, Rashada, who came in at the top of the order, she got a half century as well. Kaishana Knight, who's not on the Indie World Cup squad, she had a half century, and Shadeen Nation also had 1/2 century. And when you put that into context, if one of those top three batters don't make a solid score, 50 or 100, West Indies generally will not put a great competitive score on the board. And I believe that that's an area that the coaching staff will be looking to see how the likes of Shemaine Campbell and Shadeen Nation support those other top order players in order to give the team that depth. I think what the team is lacking is depth.
mm,
Initially, I don't think I ever got to say this publicly, but initially I was not very fond of Deandra opening. But since she's not bowling as much, and then you started to see that she's been getting those scores because I miss her attack
mm.
in the middle lower order in the depth of the innings. But she's been working at the top order, and Haley has been coming into her own in the middle as well after she struggled a bit. She was struggling a bit opening, and they adjusted her position into the middle order. So I think one of the key areas will be that middle order and how much depth is shown in order to give West Indies those competitive totals, the chance that the three best batters don't perform.
I'm glad you've mentioned this because one of the questions I'd written down to ask you, I'd called it top order woes, but what I meant by that when I wrote it down and what was going through my head was, do you think our side is structured appropriately? Do you think the players are in the best positions they could be? Now, effectively, you've already answered it, but looking at how we lined up versus South Africa and Pakistan, chopping and changing to give players game time, obviously, we've got Stefani at 4 and Haley at 5, and obviously Deandra opening. Given their ability, do you think that's the best way to utilize them to almost space out the run making, if that makes any sense? Or would you have them 1, 2, 3 or 1, 1, 3, 4 or whatever it might be? Or do you think Courtney's got it right by having them 1, 4 and 5? Because I just look at Rashada, obviously, I'm assuming we're gonna go with Rashada. We're gonna give her a run, etc. She struggled a bit in South Africa and even actually a bit versus Pakistan in Pakistan.
Yeah,
Casey has been all right, in
yeah.
fairness. Casey has been all right at number 3, but the question marks over Rashada just essentially means at the moment we're looking like we know an early wicket's falling. Now, do we just accept that, or do we move a Haley to compensate for that? Do you think we just have to try mix and match with what we've got and just hope for the best?
Well, I think that there's room for a bit of flexibility because Kaisia has the experience at the top as well. So you could also go for Knight and Dotting
Mm,
and have Stefani at three, and then you have the likes of you have the option of Nation, Campbell, if you're going to drop one of the two of them at four,
mm,
and then Haley at five, and then you go down the line because I would like to space out Stefani and Haley a bit,
mm.
because and it also would give the other batters some responsibility as well, and I guess some confidence too to be batting, and they will have more time to bat. Many times Nation, Henry, the all rounder, those ladies will come in when there isn't much left in the game.
Yeah.
So it depends on the team's plan, but having the likes of Knight, I think that she can become a backup opening player in the event that Rashada and Deandra isn't successful.
Yeah, and to give the team their due, I think Courtney spoke last year about he wants to see the team get closer to scoring 250 on a more regular basis. Now, I think we have to give them some props here because when South Africa came to the Caribbean last year, it to all intents and purposes they blew us away. Well, in the men's and women's game, but they, but they blew us
Right.
away. And actually, we must respect the fact that in this recent what I call warm-up series in South Africa, actually it was far more competitive
Competitive,
than
that's
it
right.
had been when South Africa came to the Caribbean. And if you take away the game which got rained off, people will forget that South Africa were 87 for 5 when
Five.
that game got rained off and West Indies were looking likely to win it. Hence, the result could have been a series draw, 2-2. So
So
it's not as doom and gloom as it might look on the surface of it, but it still kind of echoes your point that even if you look at that game where it was 87 for 5, that was off the back of Deandra's 150.
50.
So, so it still links
Yeah.
to you need one of the big three to come off in a real big way to give the team a platform to bowl at. And this is where we move to the bowling. I am more confident in our ability to potentially restrict a side than I am with our ability to consistently score.
Post a big score.
Yeah, post. Let's even say 220,
240. Yeah,
220, 230,
220.
240.
Mhm.
I if the team can post a 220 to 240, I would actually back us to maybe defend it. With the ball. But what do you think about
Yeah.
our bowling attack?
I think that the bowling has done reasonably well. Again, Haley Matthews, she's been the leading wicket taker for us in the last 2 years. She has 23 wickets alongside Anissa. And Anissa, is the third most has the third most wickets in ODI cricket. And I think that a lot of the bowling is going to surround those two. You have Shamilia Connell, who had a bit some injury issues over the last year or so, but I think that in South Africa, she started to look better. The pace looked to be up,
Mm,
and also the experience of Shakira Selman. Looking forward to seeing her because she in the last World Cup she was unfortunately injured, so she had been withdrawn. So this will now be her real full first World Cup. And the young Ramharap, I'm looking
mm,
forward to see how they utilize her because I know Anissa is the same off-break bowler as well, but I think that Ramharap has done pretty well. She's had 7 innings and taken 7 wickets at 25, and I think that that's pretty decent for an inexperienced player. The captain Stefani, she's had some challenges with injury and stuff, and her bowling has some might say fallen off a bit. But I still think that her experience could be very, very useful. City team is in a bit of a rut and needs someone to come and tie and down, So I think the bowling, again, a good mixture of youth and experience. Can, as you said, the I'm more confident that the bowling will restrict aside and that the batting will really pose a big total. One person that I forgot to mention is Aliyah Aline. She's
Mm,
from Barbados. And she's a funny player because in the Barbados side, she played more of a batting role as someone who can bowl.
mm.
But in this West Indies side, she's more seen as a bowler. So I think that for her, she might want to show that all round ability because, as I said before, the depth could be very useful.
Most definitely, and there's two names you haven't mentioned as well, who I want to briefly discuss because we're not expecting Deandra to bowl. Well, are we? Are we actually? I
I,
wonder if they're saving Deandra to bowl at the World Cup. Um, if I don't know where I stand on it because having basically not bowled for what now?
Because
Oh, well over a year or whatever it might be.
she only bowled in the South Africa visit to the West Indies.
Mm,
That was the only series that she bowled in. She went 15.4 overs, 66 runs, 0 wickets from 4 innings. So, could be. You never know if she's working on her bowling in the nets and they're saving her because the World Cup is a pretty long competition. 7 games, right?
yeah,
Seven,
exactly. So I
seven
just
matches.
wonder if they are going to unleash Deandra because obviously she's had her fitness concerns and her injury concerns. So I just wonder if they're going to utilize Deandra at the World Cup. It's a risk having not given her much time.
Time
Or much
before.
much miles in her legs to get used to bowling again, and also the same goes for the returning Afi Fletcher, who I don't know if
Yes,
she's going to get.
Afi.
I don't know if she's going to necessarily get into the side, but again, this is a player who has served West Indies well, and we know her pedigree. Um, Different
Yeah,
kind of slow
she's
bowler
been
compared
out.
to. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, she's been out for the majority of the pandemic as well.
Mm,
So it will be interesting to see if she's back now. I mean, Afi averages like 23, 24 with the balling in one-day cricket. So you know the type of bowler that she is. But again, having not played
mm.
most of the matches that the team would have played in the period, I mean, it's a bit of area for concern. But I believe the coaching staff will get the plan together.
Yeah, because when I think when Courtney was asked about it, he said that they're. I think he's to paraphrase. He said something to the effect of we're treading lightly with Afi because
Hmm.
obviously I think she's had maternity leave as well. She's just returning. They don't want to overly expose her, but then they've put her in the World Cup squad. So my thing is, if you put her in the World Cup squad, there's an expectation that you want her to play. You know,
Yep,
she's not just there to just stand around for
that's true.
for 7 games. That in a 7 game World Cup, like similar to the setup for the 2019 Men's World Cup, you would think that the majority of the squad are getting a game at some
At some
point in
point.
time. And
Mhm.
arguably, when the World Cup is like this, where you play so many games, anybody who gets a game should be putting in trying to put in a performance that makes them undroppable for the next game,
Yes.
as opposed to Courtney and the backroom star saying this is the 11 and that's the only 11 we're
We're
really
gonna
going
play.
to play. I'd like to think there's certain players for certain games, but also the opportunity for players to make themselves undroppable, so
I
to
I
speak.
think what this World Cup is going to show is, well, it's really going to be the, I guess I don't want to say graduation, but during COVID they had a lot of camps,
Mm,
and this World Cup is really where we will see if they're going to tick those boxes that they might have, those goals that they might have set themselves before. And Afi would have been a part of the camp here in Barbados. So I don't know if they would have been started grooming her for the World Cup through the South Africa tour. And In New Zealand, you had to quarantine
Mm.
for 14 days, so there wasn't really any time to get any warm up matches there either. So it is kind of dicey if we're honest.
Yeah, most definitely. And looking at the World Cup structure, so as we said, there's the 7 games. So to remind people about how we even got to the World Cup, there were supposed to be World Cup qualifiers. In the end,
Players.
we got through, I think, with Bangladesh and Pakistan as the highest ranked teams in the qualifier. So we
Players.
basically went through by default.
Mhm.
I think Courtney, if he's honest, would have preferred to just get some games,
Yeah.
irrespective of the quality of opposition and whether we won them all or not. I'm fairly certain he would have preferred the World Cup qualifiers as actual games
Yeah.
for the team to play. But looking at the 8 teams in it, you have New Zealand, Australia, England, South Africa, India, ourselves, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. In terms of the ICC rankings, however much people want to pay stock by that, West Indies women are ranked 7th. So, based on that, based on that, technically we should only be winning 1 game in this World Cup. If we go with the idea of
Rankings.
ICC rankings, we should only be winning 1 game. But when I looked at it, I think an okay World Cup for us would be to win 3 out of 7. I think I'm not saying that's what the team should be aiming for, but I think based on who we're playing, so Pakistan and Bangladesh, we should certainly be aiming to beat them. That gives us 2 wins. And then it's just about, I think Australia are a step too far for us. I think England will probably be a step too far for us. India's a bit of a question mark. I couldn't really give you an
Yeah. In
answer.
in India, India has. I think India has selected an interesting squad. To be honest, the one player that I thought missing was Jemima. I thought
Mm,
that she was a staple in the middle order. Mithali and Harmanpreet in the series against New Zealand. I think that the middle order hasn't really given them the boost. So I think that India is one that has a question mark. West Indies can possibly get past India.
yeah, so I had India, New Zealand, and South Africa all as question marks as
Marks,
to,
yeah,
well, you never know if things if things go well on
on
any
the day.
given day, it
Yeah,
could. So I think 2 wins we should expect. One we should definitely expect given our ranking. Two, I think is actually the proper expectation, and then from there, 3, I think you could come away from the World Cup and say, yeah, fine, fine. Work in progress. That's fine. Let's build on this. Anything above 3, I think you would have to say it's a positive World
it's a
Cup for the
feel.
team. That's how I see it. Do you see it differently?
I see it similar to that because I believe that we have to temper our expectations. As I would have said earlier, I don't think that we can really grade them by wins and losses.
Mm,
And the last World Cup, I thought that the entire team lacked some energy, you
mm.
know. So I'm looking forward to seeing the girls enjoy their cricket. So I'm not going to be too hard on them if they don't win, say, 4 or 5 matches. But what I want to see the most is those improvements in the batting, the improvements in the bowling. More players getting half centuries, more even getting centuries, that type
Mm.
of stuff. But not to really grade them on the wins and the losses. So I think it's more to sum it up, just temper expectations and not just blast them like we blast the men.
I mean, yeah, you're asking a lot there, you know. But we can only hope and pray that the public will be more sympathetic towards the women
Yes.
in their World Cup campaign. But what the final thing I kind of wanted to end on, and I think is actually probably the most important point of all, the World Cup notwithstanding, at the end of the day, the World Cup will pass, and at the end of March, the World Cup will go away, and there won't be another one for a certain amount of time, and so on and so forth. What for you, Ayana, are the concerns about the women's game in general? So, I mean, we have so much to say about the men's game and coaching and this, that, and not enough cricket and batting deficiencies and so on and so forth. But at least they're playing. At least there's games for them to play. If you were in a Cricket West Indies board meeting tomorrow and you were requesting certain things to change with regards to the women's game, what would be on your agenda if we're going to be serious about actually I'm probably saying the answer here, investing in women's cricket.
Yeah. Obviously, we know that game time is one of the most important things. This one is for the territorial boards.
Mm,
Here in Barbados, there isn't a lot happening at the youth level for young girls. When I was a little girl, I went to softball, cricket games with my mom, and that doesn't exist anymore.
mm,
So I believe that the territorial boards, whether it's in partnership with the Ministry of Educations in the countries or the Ministry of Sports, they need to get out to those young girls to encourage them to play the sport, because it can't only be just a girl see someone on cricket and say they want to be a cricketer, or their brother or cousin is a cricketer and they want to play. We have to make it, we have to give them the opportunity to choose, say, yes, I want to do this. But if it is not there, it isn't even an option.
mm, mm,
And I think that that is a critical area. I know the ICC are looking to have a girls under 19 competition, and I know a lot of the girls that were around the West Indies camp and stuff were pretty young, but we still need to build that. We still need to build that base for more girls to come through after them to play in the World Cup after and the World Cup after. So, in addition to better resources and stuff for the women, because the women are still very far compared to the men,
mm.
I think that there's something needs to be done at that grassroots level in order to lay the foundation and then add to what already exists.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually because as we record this today, I was reading an article this morning. I think I'm going to say it's the Windward Islands. So they have just their under 19 girls just went to the United States
Yeah, yep.
to play the United
To
States, and I
play,
was
yep.
reading an article today about how they're planning to. I think they're holding some more trials for, and that might sound like a really simplistic thing, but as a Jamaican, I couldn't tell you about what's happening in Jamaica. So when I was reading it about the Windwards, I was thinking, at least they've got something. That's what
Something.
was going through my head when I was reading it. Wow, at least they're doing something. But is that being mirrored from island to island to island to nation to country, etc.? No. The reality is, if we're going to be honest, the answer is no. And that level of inconsistency where one cricket board, in this case, the Windwards board, is actively trying to do something for their
Something.
women's game, and then another cricket board, I couldn't tell you what they're doing. So what the for me, the inevitability is we fast forward 3 years now, and let's say for example these traveling reserves, so Casey, Mandy, Janilla. Who's the next Casey,
So,
Mandy,
yep.
Janilla? Because where are we going to find them?
Find them. That's right. Barbados has been selected as the team who won the last
Oh, to go to the
women's
Commonwealth.
tournament, going to the Commonwealth Games. And I honestly, I probably need to do some digging, but we're in February heading to March, and those games are in June, July.
Mm, mm.
And I honestly don't know what's going on with the preparation here in Barbados. I mean, yeah, we have big, great players. Matthews, Knight, Dotting, Connell, Salmon, but I still think that the reserves at home still need to get some quality game time. So those are the areas that the boards need to address in order to give the ladies the best opportunity to be successful.
Most definitely, and I think that's probably the best way to kind of bring all of this to a close, because fundamentally, if we're not going to say if the territorial boards are not going to do this, we will then end up in a situation where 3 years from now, you have Ayana and myself talking about a next World Cup. The same players are there. The same lack of cricket's not being, going on, and we're going round and round in circles. And then the same narrative develops of why has the West Indies women's team declined, when we all know what the answer is, but we can't. It's not good enough to know what the answer is. Everyone knows what the answer is, but nobody wants to do anything about it. But instead just complain and cuss about why it is the way it is, and so on and so forth. So I think that's why I make you right when you say, let's temper our expectations and let's first and foremost look to see the continued progression and development of this side team at the World Cup. Because if they can do that, it at least allows them to set a foundation and a base to work from to the next World Cup cycle.
Yeah, that's right.
So, I mean,
and Stefani said in an article with ICC Media Zone that the coaches have them in a good space.
Yes,
they're in a good space. So, looking forward to seeing some good things.
Yeah, and totally, and that just ultimately echoes your point. If they're mentally in a good space, they'll play better cricket in general. And I think finally, just before we wrap this up, people, it is worth just mentioning, I should have said it earlier on, Pete Russell, who is the CEO or COO for CPL, has come out
looking to work on.
And claimed, I don't know if it's going to happen for this year's CPL. It would be good if it did, but it looks like he's either succumbing to the pressure or believes now is the right time to include the women in CPL. Long overdue, in my mind. Long overdue. And to be honest, if territorial boards aren't going to do anything, then actually CPL is the next best option for some regular women's cricket to go on. So if that does get off the ground this year, that would be one positive move with regards to getting some more cricket for women around the region. So, Ayana, I just want to say, as ever, listen, that it says 38 minutes on my clock. That's flown by. You wouldn't think that we'd be talking that long. But as ever, I just want to say thank you for coming on and doing what I call an initial look to the West Indies women's team as we head towards World Cup. For those who are listening, Ayana and I have spoken off or backstage before we did this recording about doing some more content around this. So don't think this will be the only thing you'll see with regards to Women's World Cup. Obviously, there's 7 matches coming up across March. There's plenty to be getting into once the World Cup kicks off. But Ayana, I'll give you the last words.
Look forward to some interesting faces, and we're going to bring life to women's cricket, because at the end of the day, women have a voice.
And love it. Do you know what? You couldn't have summed it up any better. Women indeed have a voice, people, and loads of you have always got on to us, rightly so, I hasten to add, a CCP saying, get Ayana back. We want to see some more diversity on the show, 100%. And I promised you that we would. Ayana's back, and we'll continue to bring Ayana and others on so that we can make sure that when we talk about the West Indies game, we're talking about all of the West Indies game and not just one subsection of it. So thank you very much, people. That's been another episode of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Thank you and good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rule seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.